Hey everyone, how are you? This is Making the Movement on the Move. Welcome everyone, thank you for joining us today at the OurSociety Experiment in our 2018 kickoff interview for local municipality candidate Charlie Kratovil, running for mayor of New Brunswick, New Jersey. OurSociety, as you're already aware, is a non-profit, non-partisan transformational project where we're seeking to bring light on local elections by making it easier and more convenient than ever to get involved and understand the candidates who are running for office in your local municipalities. So, Charlie, why don't you, welcome to the show. First, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me, Ron.
No, I'm really excited about it. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about you? So, you're the founder and editor of New Brunswick Today. Mm-hmm. You started the Patterson Press, right? You founded that as well. How do you go from, why are you running for office? Because you have this journalistic experience, you're a huge community advocate, right? A lot of things that we could kind of get into during this interview, but what made you make that leap to go from community advocate and journalist to actually making the plunge to run for mayor in New Brunswick?
Yeah, so in my career I've done a lot of community organizing work and ended up being fortunate enough to get my degree in journalism and media studies. So went to Rutgers, fell in love with New Brunswick, and have been trying for the past decade or more to help that city. And so I am basically was surprised to find a job in journalism. I was lucky to be able to start the Patterson Press, and I learned from one of the best reporters in the game, Joe Malaconico, who taught me how to do hard news, do it right, be fair, get people to trust you, and to cover a big city like Patterson with a lot of problems. And I learned from Joe that the only way things are going to get better is if you shine a light on the problems, right? And so I put those lessons to work in my home city of New Brunswick, and after I left the Patterson Press, while I was doing some other community organizing work, I started New Brunswick Today. Mm-hmm. We are the only bilingual newspaper in New Jersey. We have covered a number of important stories and exposed a lot of scandals and corruption in New Brunswick. So in doing that work over the past 7 years, I learned a lot about the problems that we have in New Brunswick and why those problems persist. And so after all these years of seeing that happen and seeing a really alarming lack of democracy in my city, I stepped up and put myself out there as a candidate to make the changes that I think we need.
Wow, so can you give us, that's really interesting for someone like yourself, and you're a millennial, right? I mean, I just want to put that out there.
Technically, according to Insider MJ, I'm a millennial on the rise.
Yeah. Well, congratulations for that.
Thank you.
So but I find it really fascinating that someone who, like yourself, has just been involved in the community. You said you've exposed corruption. Can you share with us like an example of something because of your efforts that you were able to change that otherwise would have maybe been not as kosher for the people of New Brunswick? Yeah,
so I mean, one of the most important responsibilities of the municipal government is providing clean drinking water to the citizens of the community. And in New Brunswick, we had a very unfortunate scandal where the person who was in charge of the entire water treatment plant, basically the water treatment plant operator, is required by law to file paperwork and make sure that proper tests are being done, and that if there is something wrong, that the DEP is notified, and that in some cases the public is notified. And so you might have this happen from time to time where the water treatment operator tells the community, don't drink the water without boiling it first. And apparently over several years this was supposed to be happening several times, and they were just covering it up. Yeah, totally not telling the public or the DEP, falsifying records, submitting the false records, and not telling the public that they shouldn't be drinking the water without boiling it. And so that was something that I learned. There was an investigation ongoing. I asked about it at a city council meeting. I kept researching it. One thing led to another. Eventually the DEP did step in and issue administrative orders, and I kept asking the question, well, why no criminal charges?
Yeah.
Why, you know, when are you going to do? When are you going to hold these people accountable? And eventually, a man did plead guilty to the crime of public corruption, and did you know, go to prison for that crime. And that was just one of the scandals at the water utility. We had another scandal later on, and there were a number of other municipal government scandals that we helped shine a light on.
Now you're running on a platform, based on your site profile and your own website, of clean air, clean water, clean government, and for the people, essentially. So why don't you expand on, briefly on those topics, those 4 topics, and really, why don't you give us kind of an encompassing of your platform for those, our viewers watching?
Sure. So it's really, we're a unique city in so many ways. We are the county seat, so we've got the courthouse, and we're kind of a little bit of a hub for central New Jersey. We also have the State University, which is a tremendous resource, the largest university in New Jersey. It brings with it, problems and issues for the local community, but it also brings tremendous potential.
Sure.
And certainly, being a person who came to New Brunswick to go to Rutgers, I really value that experience and think that it's a great place for a university, and that I want to make it the type of town where students who go to that university might actually want to stay and raise a family, start a business, and things like that. Unfortunately, so many of my peers are very quick to leave after they graduate, and they almost treat it like it was a jail sentence or a prison sentence. They say, I did my 4 years, I'm out of here. I got it. They didn't feel welcome in the town for a variety of reasons. And I think one of those big reasons is the New Brunswick Parking Authority.
Sure.
So the Parking Authority has a bad reputation in New Brunswick. They have turned us into the parking deck capital of New Jersey. Most people don't realize this, but we have more public parking decks than any other city in New Jersey. And our parking authority is by far the most massive bureaucracy when it comes to parking authorities in New Jersey. It's a huge agency, and building all these parking decks, they borrow the money to do it. So they've now, the current number is $396 million in debt.
Does the state own them? Does the New
They
Brunswick?
are a creation of the city government.
The city government, okay.
They're approaching their 70th anniversary any day now. And over those 70 years, they have transformed the city into the parking capital, and accrued a lot of debt doing that. And so I think that is perhaps the biggest problem facing the financial future of the city. And you might say, well, how does this deal with clean air? Well, at the end of the day, our approach as a city to transportation has been very, very car-centered. And the parking authority is the main reason for it, right? They are in the business of parking, so we come up with parking solutions to our transportation problem. And if you talk to urban planners these days, transportation planners, they'll tell you you can't build your way out of the parking problem like we've been trying to.
Okay.
And so we just keep our, the saying is when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, we have a parking authority, and so every time we have a parking or transportation traffic issue, the approach that's proposed and implemented is borrow millions of dollars and build another parking deck. And at this point, we are we're at the end of the road. We can't keep doing that anymore. And so what I want to do is actually develop a coherent system of buses that would help people get around from neighborhood to neighborhood. We have a lot of people who can't even afford cars, let alone the steep price of parking. And I want to make it easy for those folks to get to grocery stores, educational and work opportunities, medical appointments. Because right now a lot of folks are stranded in their neighborhood, and they are kind of stuck with whatever they have in their neighborhood, and can't get around. And it's also something that would be good for business and good for visitors if there was a simple, easy bus system that would help you get around without having to necessarily have that car and bring that car and pay expensive rates to park that car. So I want to eliminate the New Brunswick Parking Authority, and I want to create a transportation department under City Hall that would actually create a comprehensive approach to all of the transportation issues.
How would, aside from the length of the terms, what would you say is the biggest thing that you, in New Brunswick today, based on the current leadership over the last 27 years, that you would say is the biggest problem? Now, it may be the things you already mentioned, maybe the parking authority, right? It may be education, it may be access to transportation and information, all critical things. Is there anything else that has really stuck out about this administration that you living in New Brunswick, you being a resident there, that you really find frustrating, or
Sure. I think there's a crisis of priorities. At the end of the day, some things get all the funding and all the attention. There's a huge focus on downtown development, even when that development doesn't serve anybody but the developers, right? So these are, in many cases, housing that's being built that is out of the price range of the vast majority of New Brunswick residents. And in some cases has no set-aside units for affordable housing. These buildings, obviously take their toll on the infrastructure, the water, the roads, the parking, and they're almost always done the way the developer wants them done. I feel they're not negotiating the best possible outcomes for the residents when it comes to those downtown developments. I also feel like there's a tremendous amount of money spent on the police department, but residents are still not happy with the way that the crime is approached. And also, I think that the police department could use some more accountability. So I would like to see a civilian review board to be able to investigate allegations of misconduct. I think that body cameras should be a required part of the police uniform.
Sure.
And that's something where the city says they agree with me, but they can't seem to find the money to do it for years. So there's not a single body camera deployed in the New Brunswick Police Department, while we have other towns, the Rutgers Police has them, Highland Park has them, and New Brunswick, with their huge police budget, can't seem to find the funding to make it happen. Well, I'm going to make sure that the resources go where they need, and I think that's an area where we need them, because they'll ultimately save us money in the long run, because we look at how much is spent on lawsuits alleging police abuse of power, and we've seen, honestly, more than $2 million just on 2 lawsuits brought by police against their bosses. Officers who sued over allegations of racism and corruption, and ultimately, a lot of times the only videos are available are the ones that the police cars have on board.
Gotcha.
But I would like to see the police wear those cameras, and it will ultimately be able to settle a lot of allegations much quicker in terms of finding out whether anything wrong was done, and if something wrong was done, you got to move forward with discipline, and if nothing wrong was done, then we can move on without a cloud over the head of the department. So that's what I would like to see.
Okay, great. Wrap up the formal part of your run. Why don't you explain to me, why would someone, let's say, specifically, because I think you were obviously very engaged in your community through your both professional work and your campaign, but what about those college students who could assume temporary residence in New Brunswick, right, and can vote in the New Brunswick election? They're at Rutgers. Why should they actually do the effort to register and vote for you? Why?
Well, thank you for the question. I'm glad you asked. There are a number of reasons. First and foremost is convenience. So, election day is a Tuesday. You're probably going to have classes, and you might not have a car. So, if you want to make sure that you get to vote, you should vote in the place where you rest your head every night. So, if you live in the College Avenue dorms, you're going to be voting at the Lincoln Elementary School if you choose to register in New Brunswick. If you live on the Cook Douglas campus, you'll more than likely be voting at the Lord Sterling Elementary School, which is probably much easier for you to get to on a Tuesday than hitching a ride to mom and dad's hometown and going through the motions just to vote there. Secondly, I think it's more practical. If you are current student at Rutgers, you're probably spending at least 9 months of the year in New Brunswick. So why you would want to go to a different town where you're only going to spend maybe 3 months of the year and vote in those local elections, I don't think there's as strong a case. Maybe there's a good reason that you want to do that, and it's your choice. But I think that if you have to deal with the housing situation, if you have to deal with the crime and the police issues and the transportation system and the parking authority in New Brunswick, you should cast your vote in New Brunswick, where you can make a change on those issues that are going to affect you at least those 9 months out of the year. And we do have many year-round student residents who live all 12 months in New Brunswick. And then the third reason would be power. Students have a lot more power if they all register to vote in the same place. If they all register to vote in our great city of New Brunswick, students will have a better chance of influencing the way the city government treats them, of making it a better, more welcoming city for them, and ultimately having their voices heard, as opposed to those same students all splitting up and going to any of the 565 other towns in New Jersey and casting their individual votes there. Students have more power if they are voting in the same place, and if they can get united behind a candidate, then they really have a powerful chance to make a difference in our city, and I hope that they'll get behind me.
Once again, everyone, Charlie Kratovil running for mayor in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Thank you so much for joining us today at the OurSociety Experiment, and we wish you the best of luck. Make sure you check out Charlie's profile at oursociety.org. We'll link it again below. Thanks everyone for tuning in. See you guys next time.